Every Diablo 4 update has plenty of busted builds that will almost certainly get nerfed in no time at all, and Vessel of Hatred is no exception. But one of my favorite endgame builds isn't quite so eyebrow-raising that it's likely to be high on Blizzard's naughty list, and yet I still find myself blowing through endgame content and having a blast with it. I call this hilarious poisonous build the Bug Bomb Spiritborn, and if you'd like to use your index finger and exploding bugs to dominate the hordes of hell, then just stay a while and listen. First things first, to use this build with any level of success, you'll need to roll a Spiritborn Wanderer, complete the Vessel of Hatred campaign, and get your character to level 60 before you're ready to grind for the items and aspects needed to make this work. You'll also need to have completed the Spiritborn character class quest to unlock the Spirit Hall, so make sure to go and run that if you haven't yet. With that out of the way, let's dive into the build itself. This is a centipede build that relies on high poison output, specifically insect swarms, that are the byproduct of Touch of Death and other Spiritborn items and skills. The basic idea is to make the centipede skill Touch of Death your main attack, generate swarms of insects, and cause those swarms to explode when you score a critical strike. Then apply the Insatiable aspect to one of your legendary items so those exploding bugs do exponentially more damage when they pop early. The result is a hilarious loop where you repeatedly poke enemies with Touch of Death, generate tons of bug swarms that fly around and poison everyone, then explode and cause tens of thousands of damage to everyone in the vicinity. Let's talk about the skill tree. First, you'll need to work your way down to and fully upgrade the Touch of Death skill, of course. The most important detail here is to make sure you grab the Poised Touch of Death upgrade to rid yourself of the cooldown and make the skill a core skill for some cool synergy we'll discuss in a bit. Then you'll want to get all the way down to the bottom of the skill tree to buy the key passive Noxious Resonance to make your poison swarms explode. Along the way, I recommend buying Scourge and Armored Hide to help with survivability since this build will drain your life. More on that later. Other recommendations include Ravager for seriously increasing your DPS potential, and Counterattack and the Hunter to help you do additional damage and provide a bit of mobility, something this build otherwise lacks. And Vortex for pulling enemies towards you to help those explosions deal damage to large groups. But so long as you've got Touch of Death upgraded and Noxious Resonance, the other details here don't actually matter all that much, so feel free to experiment. For the Spirit Hall, I recommend picking the Gorilla as your main ability, which grants you Thorns and Barriers for survivability, and Jaguar as the secondary spirit for generating ferocity that helps with Jaguar abilities. Next, we'll need to unlock the Insatiable aspect and apply it to an item. You can find this perk on random items out in the world, but the most reliable way to unlock it at the start is by tackling the Betrayed Tomb dungeon in Nahantu. This will give you access to the worst possible version of the aspect, but you can upgrade its potency as you find better versions out in the world and dismantle them. Once you've got it unlocked, pay a visit to the occultist vendor and imprint it onto one of your legendary items. I did so on my amulet for the 50% increased effect. And be prepared to do much more damage whenever your bugs explode. For equipment, you'll need to do a bit of grinding. Things like the Crossed Undercity, the Pit, and other endgame activities that have a chance of dropping various desirable legendary and unique items. The most important item is the weapon, the Rod of Kepaleki. Who names this stuff? This has the awesome unique effect of turning all core skills into basic skills, and as you'll recall, we made sure to make our most important ability, Touch of Death, a core skill. If you don't understand why this is important, it's because while most skills, including core skills, expend resources to use, basic skills are meant to be your bread and butter that you rely on in between using more powerful skills, and so generate resources instead of using them up. This means with this weapon, we've turned our most important ability into something we can spam endlessly and which generates resources we can spend to cast other skills. With this equipped, you can get rid of whatever irrelevant basic skill you chose at the top of your tree and replace it with Touch of Death, a huge game changer. Not only that, but the Rod of Kepaleki also makes it so when you're at max vigor and cast a core skill, it consumes all your vigor in exchange for a guaranteed critical strike that does increased damage. Remember how our swarms of bugs explode early when we trigger a critical strike? Yeah, you guessed it. Now we can ensure that happens near constantly while we spam Touch of Death. Other great items for this build include the Harmony of Ebawaka unique helm, which has an awesome unique effect that makes your secondary Spirit Hall choice apply to all skills, meaning everything you cast will be a Jaguar and a Gorilla skill in addition to whatever they actually are, which will often be Centipede with our current build. That's 3 spirit types and all their associated effects triggering every time you cast Touch of Death. I also like the Jacinth Shell chest piece, which heals you whenever you spend vigor and reduces your cooldowns in exchange for draining your health. That shouldn't be a problem with a build that constantly heals us. Craze of the Dead God gloves are also a favorite of mine, as they have damage dealt to you applied as poison over time instead. This doesn't exactly synergize with our bug explosions, but makes you a lot less likely to die when you've got plenty of time to regenerate life being slowly drained from you over time, versus applied all at once. Finally, there's Ring of the Midnight Sun, which regains spent vigor whenever you critically strike. Since we're doing that literally all the time, we'll be getting our vigor back very quickly. It also gives us the passive effect of counterattack, which improves our dodge chance. With some or all of these things in place, you'll be able to run around poking people by holding down the Touch of Death button, watch your foes take poison damage, then die in massive explosions of bug swarms. That's the Bug Bomb build doing its deadly work. In between that, you can pull enemies to your location with Vortex, apply shields and dodge strikes with Armored Hide and counterattack respectively, and use whatever else DPS dealing tricks you've decided to roll with. But honestly, you can usually get away with literally just using Touch of Death on its own and killing everything in seconds. That's the great thing about this build. In addition to being incredibly effective and often hilarious, it also lets you just turn your brain off and mindlessly steamroll through all sorts of endgame activities. And what's more in the spirit and legacy of the Diablo series than that? For more, check out our guides on the biggest changes to Diablo 4 and all new skills and passives added with Vessel of Hatred. And for everything else, keep spreading poisonous swarms of exploding insects with IGN.